Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today to review the benefit of Alyssa's Law for New York schools. I wanted to go through just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. The first is that everyone is in listen-only mode, but we do have the chat going, so if you'd like to send in a question, we'll be monitoring the chat. And we will be sending out a recording of the webinar later. So thanks everybody for joining. I would like to introduce you to the group that is here with me today on the webinar. I don't think my page went forward. Great, there we go. I am joined by Will Fullerton, who is CENTEGIX Head of Government Affairs. Will, thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Mary.
Also joined by Rod Russell, who is CENTEGIX, new to the CENTEGIX team and a national security specialist.
Good afternoon, guys.
Thanks, Rod. All right. We, as a company, CENTEGIX thought it was important to host a conversation about the story of Alyssa's Law and Alyssa's Law specifically in New York because of the experience that we've had over the past several years in providing mobile panic button solutions, and especially to those school district customers in Florida that we've been working with, where CENTEGIX has been named as an approved vendor for Florida's version of Alyssa's Law. And so as we get close to the New York Alyssa's Law being approved by the governor, we just thought it was important to share our experience with those who will be working towards helping to bring their schools in compliance and the benefits of doing so. So there are a few things that we thought that would be appropriate for us to cover in the session today. The first is a brief story of Alyssa's Law, like how did we get to the place today where we're talking about this. Will is going to help with an overview of the requirements of New York's law for mobile panic buttons and ensuring rapid response in emergency situations. We're going to do a review of different mobile panic button solutions that districts often choose and some factors to think about in selecting those different options or evaluating those. And then finally, we have a few stories about how districts have benefited from having Alyssa's Law in place. And those stories are coming from our experience in Florida. So if I were to go back to how did this all begin with Alyssa's Law, it goes back to a very tragic day in 2018. It was Valentine's Day, February 14th. This Marjorie Stoneman Douglas school shooting in Parkland, Florida left 17 people injured and 17 people dead. And one of those was Alyssa Law. Lori Alhadeff was Alyssa's mother. And Lori Alhadeff, I've had the honor really of being able to spend a little bit of time with her recently. Lori is a very powerful and determined person. And listening to her tell the story of that day, it is really, it's unimaginable for any parent to even think about. I think what is unique about Lori Alhadeff is how she has taken that experience and turned it into something greater. Lori will tell you that in the days after the event, she was overwhelmed with the hopes and prayers comments from people and the comments around how things really need to change. And she said to herself that really she needed to take action. She has a phrase, "Your voice is power," and she has been on a mission to help schools be safer. And Lori has done that in 3 ways. She ran for school board in her home county of Broward County, Florida. She launched a nonprofit organization called Make Our Schools Safe, which, as you can imagine, is dedicated to school safety best practices and ways to help empower staff and students in creating a culture of safety. And thirdly, she has championed Alyssa's Law. And here's some sample language about Alyssa's Law, which that it requires public schools to have mobile panic alert systems that enable really anyone to get access, to get a call for help directly to first responders and law enforcement agencies. The idea there is that the more people who are empowered to get that call for help directly to a responder agency, in the spirit of time equals life, the faster you can get help needed to the right place, the better your chances of having a more positive outcome. So that's a little bit about the story behind Alyssa's Law and how we've got here. It has been approved in Florida and also in New Jersey. And of course, today we're here to talk about the New York version of Alyssa's Law. And for that, I'd like to ask Will, if you can help us out with an overview of what the New York version looks like.
Yeah, so in New York, school boards have to review their school safety plans every year. And Alyssa's Law in New York requires school boards now to consider silent panic alarms that notify 911 first responders in case of crisis. And so this is all backed by or funded by about a $3 billion infrastructure building fund that New York State has, and offers a reimbursement process to school districts for school safety infrastructure. The governor's scheduled to sign it tomorrow, actually, and then we'll see more guidance from the Department of Education there in the following weeks.
Great, thank you, Will. Okay. And Rod, I know this is where you'll have a lot of experience to chime in. But when we talk about the broad category of mobile panic button solutions, there's really three that people tend to look at most. One is a panic button, like literally wall-mounted panic button. So that's one option. Another option is a wearable. So something like CENTEGIX CrisisAlert badge that a teacher or staff member would be able to carry with them. And another category is a mobile phone application that staff download to their personal device, whether it be their iPhone or some type of Android device. So Rod, let's look at each of these options in a little bit more detail. So with a wall-mounted panic button, I think it's probably obvious some of the things to think about with those. They're non-mobile. You have to be physically near the mobile panic button to be able to, to the wall-mounted panic button in order to be able to activate it. These types of solutions require usually some type of infrastructure upgrade. Maybe it's some wiring to actually put the panic button in place. And there's limited availability, right? They can only be in so many places around a school. Pretty easy to activate if you just push it, but sometimes can be a trick to actually get to that location. And in order for someone to be able to use it, they have to be able to break away from the situation that they may be trying to manage to get to that wall-mounted panic button.
And as first responders, what we were seeing, kind of a boots on the ground perspective, if you will, were that front office staff would be a great example. Usually you'll find that panic button located under the desk or nearby. But what we were actually finding out that the threat or the person or individual that might have a domestic dispute that involved the children weren't walking in a threatening manner that would call for a button. That was being done later, and that was the issue. They no longer maybe were in that chair position. certainly able to stand up and maybe de-escalate the situation first, and then realizing I have to backtrack and go back into the button. And we were seeing that time and time again. So thanks, Mary. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Great. And any other sort of considerations about the wall-mounted panic button, Rod? Maybe like time to install or maintenance or anything like that that you think is important for people to know?
Yeah, it certainly is a very heavy system as far as implementation. There has to be an engineer most of the time because you're dealing with the electric as well as the conduit runs to the actual button themselves. Even the runs to the button have to be covered per code. So it is not an easy system to deploy. And it should be considered, you know, depending upon the amount of sites and the amount of buttons per school. Certainly, we're talking months instead of weeks.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, the next type of solution we should talk about is the mobile phone application. And so like so many of us have now, right, we've got the mobile phone, we're downloading all kinds of apps onto it. This is a type of solution where the district will purchase the application broadly and then ask their staff to download that app to their personal mobile device. I have heard some situations of districts that have equipped their staff with a separate mobile device specifically for the use of this mobile panic button. And that, of course, then requires that a staff member is carrying two phones, which may or may not be easy to do. But basically downloading the mobile app onto a phone. So there are some line of thoughts that is a less expensive solution perhaps, because it should just be easy to download an app. But what we see actually is that there is some resistance by staff, and sometimes that's by staff and by unions for having or asking staff to do that download. And that once it is on someone's phone, then they also have to remember to keep it updated and maintained. So for example, if they were to get a new device, then they have to re-download the app all over again. I'm going to pause there, Rod, and see if you want to chime in on any of those comments so far before I go on to some others.
You know me well. I am very outspoken concerning app-based approach. I was smack in the middle of it, and almost after 3 decades of being a first responder and working within the industry, we certainly were excited at when they hit the scene about 7 years ago. But again, going back through our responses, evaluating the districts, consulting with them, we were finding a lot of gaps, a lot of issues. Certainly, since I mentioned gaps, all of us can identify where you can go within your building and not receive a cell signal, not receive Wi-Fi. At that point, we were betting on the fact that nobody would hit a panic button in those areas. And that's where we were. They often spoke of adoption rates. We, at the time, were just struggling with it simply because of the unions not wanting to participate with the download of the app. Recently, yes, Mary, thank you for mentioning that districts are now purchasing phones. As you can imagine, we were struggling with them keeping the first phone, and now they have 2. So they are trying to overcome it by different avenues, but simply it really boils down to deciding on a system that you can get 100% or close to at the adoption rate. And when the lanyard approach came, that is exactly where the industry needed to go, in my eyes, simply because it took care of the gaps. It took care of the need for that cellular application. And certainly it kept us out of the union meetings as well.
Thank you, Rod. I think for this particular category, we should also talk about some of the technical things. So in order for the mobile phone app version of a panic button to work, somebody, of course, well, they have to have their phone with them, has to be charged. It has to be connected to the network. Now that network could either be Wi-Fi or it could be cell coverage. And I hear from people all the time about the challenges that they have getting cell coverage inside of a school. So those are some challenges. And then from a user perspective, the idea that, okay, I'm maybe trying to manage an emergency situation, but then I also need to get my phone, unlock my phone, get into the app, and then be able to initiate the alert is just a lot for someone to be having to manage while they're also perhaps dealing with a medical or other type of emergency. So that the human nature in an emergency is fight or flight. So making something that is as simple as possible is one of the designs of the next option that we're going to talk about. But before we get on to that, I did want to just say one other thing about the mobile phone applications, which is kind of in the technology limitation side, which is that they are GPS based. And so these types of solutions are able to tell emergency persons that, hey, the person who's calling for help, they are at a particular school or at a particular address, but they're not able to get into a level of detail such as room location or floor level location. And in a situation perhaps at a high school, right, those campuses are very large. And so getting help to the right place is really important. And it's a big difference between, hey, is help needed in the front office or is it needed out on the football field or at the gym or in a classroom? Rod, do you have any comments you'd like to add about any of those other limitations of this type of solution?
I would. Actually, I just got back from training the state of Florida, all counties, and the conversations there really played a role in what we're talking about, which is pressure testing the system. That's more of a reference from a responder standpoint, where I've run across several districts with an app-based approach, and they have yet to use it. It's deployed on their phones, and certainly as the perfect day moves on, we can manipulate the system. But what we were finding, again, Mary, thank you for bringing that up, is that fine motor skills. Not only that, but remembering a password, things like that, before they were able to initiate the alarm under duress. So I would highly recommend that you pressure test the systems that you choose.
Right, thank you, Rod. I think another, before I move on to the next category that I wanted to point out for everybody is that actually for both the wall-mounted and the mobile phone app versions, their ability to notify others in an emergency is limited or completely absent. And if we go back to the spirit of Alyssa's Law and the idea that time equals life, so many of the analysis of these extreme safety situations help us understand that the sooner everyone on campus knows that an incident is happening, that the campus is under threat, and that they're given direction to get to safety, which very often is to get behind a locked door and a hard corner, the sooner that everyone knows about that, then the better off everyone is going to be. And these types of solutions don't have any other notifications that come with them. So it's possible that they may be able to notify others who happen to have the app. And then again, all those things, right? Are they on their app? Do they have it with them? Do they have coverage in order to get those notifications? And so that's a limitation to consider, that their ability to notify others in an emergency is limited. Okay, Rod, I think we could move on to the last category, which is the wearable panic button. And I want to just check the chat here. Yes, someone is adding a comment that if we have districts that have purchased two phone or another phone for their staff to use for the mobile phone application version of a panic button, then they have another device that they are having to keep up with as well. So, okay. Finally, then our wearable panic button, and we would consider the CENTEGIX badge in this category. This is one of our badges. It's about the size of an ID card. And actually, most of our customers wear it just that way. They wear it behind their standard school ID badge. So some of the things to consider about for a solution like that is that these badges are very easy to deploy to all staff. It's an easy process to get them distributed, and that is how we're able to get to 100% adoption for a solution like this. It does not require staff to have a personal mobile device, nor to use it for school business, like the panic button. These have battery life of a few years. People do not have to worry about charging it overnight. And this device works everywhere on a campus and is based on our CENTEGIX IoT Internet of Things platform, and is completely independent of a school's Wi-Fi or cell coverage. Staff carry it with them all the time. It is always accessible to them, and it is very, very simple to use with just 3 quick presses of the button on the badge. Any staff member is able to initiate a call for help. And when they do that, when they push the button on the badge, that call for help is instantly and immediately delivered to the responders that have been designated for their location. And when that alert is delivered, it not only tells them who has called for help, but it will also tell them exactly where on the campus that person is located, so that responders know where to direct assistance. Okay, Ron, I've just said a lot about the CENTEGIX version of the mobile panic button, which is a wearable badge device. What else can you add to help us understand the pros and cons of this type of solution?
Yeah, I tell you what comes to mind 100% of the time from a responder standpoint. We typically use an expression. 2 things are going to happen during an emergency. 1, you're going to lose communication. And number 2, you're going to lose your mind, meaning you have to be able to stay focused on an easy task because at that point you're multitasking, and none of us can. So when we are coming into the scene, we consider the communication as far as the first thing to be dropped. And it typically is, you'll see an override on the cellular network. If it's a big event, everybody's on their phones, everybody's communicating, slowing down the network. They do have priority calls for first responders and priority numbers, but typically those are in use as well that we found. So having that that communication still in play during the event is a game changer, 100%. And then also being able to rely on the fact that it's a simple system. The badge system is a very simple system, and everyone gets that confirmation of, here it comes. I did it, here it comes. If you have an app and the faculty member next to you has initiated the alarm, you feel like, okay, I'm good. They know we're in the area. They know we're here. There was no confirmation given. What we're finding is that possibly during the event that some of those confirmations weren't sent to the responders in time. So we're trying to really narrow down that and really grab a hold of the information as it's happening. And that's really what I think that the wearable does, simply because it's very quick with the end user, and it alerts you immediately as the first responder where they're located. If I get multiple hits on the system and I start to receive that cluster, I know exactly where I'm going as a first responder. So as the situation then plays out, if you will, and we start to mitigate, then we're going to address those issues because of the real-time value of that.
Great, thank you, Rod. And Will, I wanted to just see if there's anything that you'd like to chime in about any of the three options that we've discussed so far, from the wall-mounted to the mobile phone app to the wearable device.
Yeah. Like I said, and my wife would remind me I'm getting old, so I'm creeping up on 3 decades in the industry. So I have been a part of all three. Most of us certainly remember the devices coming in at the hospitals, and then kind of growing out from there to the business community. We're all familiar with them, the panic buttons in that location. Like I said, it was a great approach when we moved to the app approach. At least we were getting it out there, and it was more eyes on the scene. But then about 2 or 3 years ago, when I started to research the wearable, that's really when I learned really to say it best. Hillsborough County Chief Newman said it best. He said, Rod, I'd rather have 2,000 eyes on it than 2. And that's exactly what you get if you have the 100% adoption rate. So it definitely is the next era in response, and certainly has provided a lot more than the apps that we were running even now or a year ago.
Rod, thank you for that. And then Will, did you have anything that you wanted to chime in on here before I move on?
Yeah, I think it's important as we look across the country in states like New York and implement Alyssa's Law style policy. Regulators and policymakers want to know that their solutions or the laws that they've passed and requirements they've put in place, that they're being used, right? And I think one of the great things CENTEGIX does is we have that data on daily usage, and kind of knowing that there's 100% adoption there. You get regulators a transparent view of how their policies are being enacted. And I think it's a huge bonus for districts, for teachers, administrators, principals, everybody in between.
Thank you, Will. So we did have a question that has come in from the audience, and the question is, do first responders need to have special equipment to locate the wearable within the building? And the answer to that question is no, there's not any special equipment that is required. As part of our solution, responders have access to our Crisis Alert application. That Crisis Alert app is accessible in both desktop form as well as via a mobile app. And when that alert comes in, they get a pop-up. It is, and for our iPhone users, it is an Amber Alert style notification if the user has that turned on. So it's very obvious that an alert is happening, and a map pops up, and it will show the responder on that map, and that is a map of the school that we've worked with the school to load into the application, so that person's location is shown on the map. So it'll say Mary Ford, where I am, and see me on the map. So that is delivered by software. So no special equipment is needed for that. Thank you for that question. Okay, there are some, additional considerations that we thought would be helpful to walk through with everyone. And so certainly the origination of Alyssa's Law was related to an extreme event. Our solution, and often these solutions in general, can be used for both these extreme events, like the unfortunate active shooter, perhaps a weather situation, as well as everyday incidents. So I want to talk a little bit about both of those things separately. So the extreme events, we've already mentioned a little bit that it is really important that when a campus is under threat, that everyone who is on that campus knows that something is going on. And so the sooner that people know that they need to get to safety, the better off they're going to be. And the way that we accomplish that through our crisis alert solution is through a combination of visual notifications and audio notifications. The audio alerts are delivered via intercom announcements. And then the visual notifications, we've got two approaches for that. The first is that we'll do a screen takeover, a desktop takeover. So any device, think of maybe the teacher's laptop or the smart board at the front of the screen, or the smart board at the front of the room, all those screens get taken over with a very obvious message with instructions that a district can customize. Typically, like in a lockdown, it's like lockdown, get to cover with some brief instructions. Those same instructions are the ones that are being played over the intercom. And then the third notification, or the second visual notification that we do, is that the part of our platform includes lighted strobes. These are placed in the ceilings, and those strobes will start to flash in color, and they have a small chirp that goes along with them. So with all of those notifications, again, the intercom notification, the desktop or screen takeover, and the flashing strobes, we're putting a lot of measures in play to ensure that when a campus threat is happening, that everyone knows as soon as possible. And I want to pause on that part of the conversation and ask Rod if you have anything that you want to contribute to that.
Really, I was just excited to learn that aspect, coming in from an app-based approach from a first responder. It definitely gives you, going back to the comment earlier, or the question earlier, the first responders, giving you the ability to rely on dispatch to be your eyes on as you're coming into the scene, but then also allowing you that app availability if you need to set up an incident command, and then be able to broaden that response as needed. So it certainly played a role with that, but it really lends more to the daily use. And I know, Mary, on your next slide, I think you'll kind of give an example of that daily use that Will and of course you brought up. I would like to bring up an example. Looking back and surveying the districts, we're learning that 92% of the time, it's that daily use, it's a staff alert. And of those 90+%, 80, almost 85%, medical fights. Those are the staff alerts that you need to start tracking. We, as an industry, have not really tracked everything. And that includes the wins. Something that was brought up in a large district meeting recently was, Rod, we want to show the stakeholders that we're doing our job, that we're providing that Alyssa's alert response that they have requested of us. And that's what I love about the system, the analytics, the data, the after action reports. We're seeing a lot of information on those after action reports that'll give you more of a proactive stance as you start to dive in on that proactive approach within the district. You'll have the data to maybe play. To give you an example, we're seeing elementary schools increasing with their alerts. I think that really speaks to the safety climate that we're experiencing at that age. They simply don't know how to deal with the stress, and then they become angry. So being that proactive district, you'll be able to see those alerts increasing and be able to then support that with mental health counseling and really have that support to wrap around those students, because the game is to intervene before, not during, not after. So as an industry, as we're pressing forward to learn more ways that we can be that proactive source, certainly that data is going to play a role. So I kind of veered off there for a minute, Mary, but it's definitely worth mentioning. Those after action reports are worth their weight in gold, both again from the incident itself, but also the wins. And that will be important both to parents and stakeholders. And by wins, I mean able to intervene, able to de-escalate, able to get that student exactly the help that they need. Those are the wins, and certainly be able to record them.
Rod, thank you. Yeah, you're right. I do have a win that I wanted to point out to everyone. And before we get to that, I want to reiterate your point about the mobile panic button solution is for every day and the extreme. And yeah, the fights, the medical weather things, the vast majority of the incidents that we see our platform being used for are those every day. And so far, our solution has been used, well, it's delivered over 100,000 alerts. And yeah, for sure, there's a lot of data that is available to districts to help them understand their safety and security situation. So going on to the wins, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, thank you, Mary, the customization of it. I mean, having a category of suspicious behavior, having the ability to then do some reporting on that, again, puts the district in a proactive approach so that they can address those issues.
Right. Okay, so we've had another question come in from the audience, which is, how can someone distinguish between the types of alerts? And so I can speak to the Crisis Alert wearable badge, and it's a simple approach for people to distinguish. So for a badge user, if they push the button 3 times quickly, then that is what we call a staff alert. That's for that more localized incident where a staff member says, I need help where I am. That's probably for your more everyday things, right? Like the medical situation or a student behavior or elopement type situation. So the 3 button press is the staff alert. The campus wide alert, we tell people just keep pushing the button until the campus locks down. And they'll know the campus locks down because they're getting all those audio and visual notifications that we talked about previously. So the intercom message, the desktop takeover, and the strobes going off. I was actually listening to a customer testimonial this morning. It was a principal who was describing an incident in which one of her teachers had used the badge to get help to a child who was choking on the playground. And thankfully, that child is doing just fine. But as I was asking this principal about how she does training in her district, she says what we tell people is you just keep pushing that button as much as you want to until you get the reaction for the campus wide. So our typical training is keep pushing until the campus locks down. So it was interesting to hear how this particular principal had translated that for her staff. So I'll just summarize. The staff alert is the 3 button press, and the campus wide alert is just keep clicking until the campus locks down. So thank you for that question. Okay, the next thing I wanted to share with everyone, and this kind of ties to some of the comments that Rod was making, is that we have seen some very direct benefit from our customers, especially those in Florida who've been implementing Crisis Alert as a mobile panic button for their version of Alyssa's Law. I wanted to share with you all a number, actually I have literally thousands of survey responses from staff members who have used their Crisis Alert badge to get help in all kinds of situations. And we get overwhelmingly positive feedback from them like these, like, I know I can get help immediately. It was very quick. I appreciate that. It was easy to use. And this response around my student would have died or been brain damaged without the badge. And that particular survey response is also related to a scenario that happened in one of the school districts in Florida. We know it as the Mia Santiago story. And this video is also available on the Make Our Schools Safe website. That's the nonprofit that Alyssa's mother, Lori Aladeff, has founded. And they promote this as one of the success stories for mobile panic buttons in schools. And the story of Mia is that she's a young girl, she's a teenager. She went into cardiac arrest in her classroom, and her teacher used her badge to get help, right? She pushed the button 3 times. Responders were notified, and they very quickly got help to Mia and quite literally saved her life because they were able to get help quickly. So that is a story that is told often, and as I said, it's one that Make Our Schools Safe promotes as one of their success stories coming out of Alyssa's Law. Okay, and then I wanted to touch on, and Rod, you really were speaking to this earlier as well, the data that districts should expect of any mobile panic solution that they picked. And I'm showing here a sample of our CrisisAlert dashboard. And Rod, if you wanted to just say a few more comments about the importance of getting data from your mobile panic button and how that data can be used.
Yeah, trends. One word, trends, and that's really what you're looking for. Coming from a behavioral threat assessment background, we need to identify the trends, and then we can then move that down to all the way down to the individuals that need the resources. And that's what you'll be able to find are the trends, the gaps within your district as far as security. If you're having a high alert school, there might be everything from a staffing issue to needs for additional SROs to simply one more counselor, as one district put it. So it really will give you that clear picture, but I really can't stress enough that the industry always amplifies the losses. You'll see it on the news. You'll certainly hear about it in your leadership meetings. And God forbid if it were to happen to your district, the media will arrive and they will be asking those questions. What we're finding is the education before the event, the proactive measures that they took were in place. And they were then able to establish all of the wins, the interventions, and it helped the threat assessment team as well. So it's a real great tie-in to if you are a district and you are talking back and forth from the security and safety side to the behavioral threat side, as most are, then you'll be able to better communicate those trends and those challenges, I should say, for each school or each site.
Thank you, Rod. And to the point about trends, I did want to let everyone know that actually tomorrow on Thursday, also at 2 o'clock Eastern, we are hosting a webinar on our spring school safety trends report. And in this analysis, we have taken all of the data from our customers and trended out what we have seen for different types of events, how many alerts per school. It's just been really interesting to see over the past couple of years how the different types of alerts have changed. Volume has certainly increased. And so if anyone is interested in that, that information is available on our website if you would like to sign up for that webinar or to get a copy of the Spring School Safety Trends report. We're happy to provide that as well. Okay, so that concludes our comments for today. I wanted to just end with a short poll for everyone that I'm going to pull up here. We will be sending out some follow information, including the the recording of the webinar, and that'll come out in the next few days. So thank you everyone for participating, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.